It's been 3 years, but yes, we are finally back to talk the newest season of Severance. Severance is back, folks. The surprisingly interesting show that came out from Apple TV 3 years ago. Kind of came out of nowhere, a Ben Stiller produced production that nobody really was like, oh, what is this going to be? Adam Scott was leading, John Turturro and Christopher Walken were like the big supporting cast members. And that first season was so interesting. I have a couple problems with it here and there. I didn't go back and watch it before prepping for this new season because I kind of just had the idea in my head. I'm like, I got too much other stuff to watch, but I am fully aware of what this show is trying to do, what it is saying, or so I thought. That first season, an incredible first season. One of the best you've seen in this modern 2020s streaming era. I think it's brilliant, and a few hiccups here and there. I don't really know what my thoughts would have been coming into season 2. Not that I wasn't thinking about the show, it just wasn't on my radar. There's other stuff in the world going on, like an ongoing actors and writers strike that definitely pushed production on this back a little bit. But I was just curious to see where we were headed for season 2. No real thought in my mind over what that could look like or how it could go, just that I was curious to see what it would be. I think this is one of the rare cases where the show having a long hiatus between seasons benefited what the show could be. The talent behind the scenes took a longer time to fully form and realize what they wanted this show to become. All of the gripes I had of like pacing or story in the first season, I think is fixed in this season and amplified in better ways. This is perhaps the greatest season of television from Apple TV. Actually, I'll just say it is. I think it's the best thing that Apple TV has produced. It might be one of the greatest seasons of television we've seen in the modern streaming era of the 2020s. This feels like people were so focused on making everything perfect. Whether that's the case or not, we could argue all day. But kind of how like the early seasons of Lost, you really felt like every single person involved on screen, behind the scenes, at every level of development was so aware of how to market this thing and make this thing and produce this thing, that the idea was so clearly there. That is what this feels like. Whether or not that is the case for Severance, which it wasn't for Lost, that was clearly a show that got lost in a lot of the ideas it was presenting and didn't know where it was going. That's how this feels to me. It feels like we have the map set out. Whether or not that's true, I don't know. But everything is so meticulously choreographed and coordinated and put together that you couldn't tell me they're lost on some ideas. Everything feels so earned and perfect. This show is fantastic. You can really feel, and I love when this happens, you can really feel where that budget went to, where that higher budget went to. They had more money, and it could easily get lost in doing some more big spectacle of whatever going on. But it went to filming in more interesting locations, using the locations we already have, like these established sets, and figuring out how we can work the camera in different ways, and up the choreography and up the cinematography. It feels like the money went towards the right things, which is so cool. We are filming outside a lot this season, and we went location scouting, and we found some of the most bleak and colorless places we could put a 4K camera in and make it look gorgeous. I think this looks gorgeous. The way cameras have evolved with the way TVs work now, everything is so in your face and digital and just like perfect. Like every single time we see a person on screen in this show, their skin and their pores are just exemplified perfectly. But I think that's also the case we're doing here, because the use of color balance and coordination and outside locations and lighting are brilliant. Like it is a team that is so comfortable with how to use a digital camera and even using film reel at times, which happens in like the very finale, which is incredible in its own right. There's just something remarkable about the craftsmanship on this show, because it could easily become the, liminal space, everything's just bleak and white and just open and there's no design to it, or like simplified design. It could easily fall into that. But we use our locations well, we use our camera well, and we amplify what can be like really boring to look at. And that is exactly what this show needs. Also, we upped the game in terms of like editing and transitions. There are some scene transitions in this season that are next level stuff, like from filmmakers and directors, where I'm like, this is so well thought out. I wouldn't think to do this kind of stuff. It's really beautiful. It's really cool. And the story this season as well, it takes off right where we like left off at the end of season 1. We explain that section of the story, and then just keeps moving forward and forward and forward, obviously heading to a cataclysmic thing happening. It's not giving you time to rest. Every major event is taking place simultaneously at this moment. Things are escalating and picking up. Just hold on, go on this journey with the story, and see where it takes you. It is 10 episodes long. A good number of those episodes are kind of standalone stories of supporting cast members, which I think is something you do when you have an idea in place to introduce those characters later on in the story. I think they're both some of the interesting parts of this season. There's an episode dedicated to Patricia Arquette's character, which could easily fall into this like random side story that doesn't go anywhere, but it really connects to the larger world we're building here and how this feels like an anti-corporation show, which it is. Like, there's something so compelling about the way this show presents corporations and class and people in charge, but also like your workplace identity and like what is free will, what is love, what is meaning, what is like a life well balanced. When the premise of your show is you go to work and you split your like being into two, so there's the workplace you that like stays in this building, and then you have like your free time elsewhere. When you are telling that story, it is so science fiction. You have to know the rights and wrongs of that world. What is the right thing to do in that scenario? What is free will in that scenario? What is existence in that scenario? And this show, it ponders both sides incredibly well. Where I think a less nuanced writer or talent would be scared to dive into either side, this wants to make you think, no, this version of Mark is right in his beliefs on this thing, and this version of Mark is right in his beliefs of these other things. It is so well handled in that aspect. I don't see stuff like this so well constructed anymore. It is so perfectly balanced. Like, the opening of this season is Mark running down a hallway in like a 3-minute shot. It's absolutely beautiful. And it's just like, wow, you didn't have to do that for a show about like liminal space and just like one long looking hallway. But the fact that you took the time to make it look that beautiful speaks volumes to the craftsmanship and care that the people behind the scenes have for this show. And I think that's fantastic. Ben Stiller, he might be the most, like, he is probably the biggest name attached to this thing. And I really like seeing him interact with fans and people online. He's been very open about the production of this, very aware of, like, what people are feeling, how they are, like, understanding stuff. I think he's found a really creative way to present this show as, like, the underdog, where it's from Apple, which is, like, a $1 trillion company at this point. But the fact that that corporation is even letting a show like this gets made, I think he is certainly aware of that. I think all the producers are aware of that this is from a company that would probably do something like this. And the world building this season is another huge part of the story. We learn of the different levels in Lumen. We learn of like the higher ups, the people in charge, more of like Helly's background and like who her lineage is. All that stuff comes into light in different ways. The outside world also plays a bigger part. We are introduced to like the more private, outy lives of our main characters, and it leads to some very interesting story stuff. The main stuff is the relationship with like Mark and Helly and like how they're behaving in that world. But the side stories we get with the other members of the data micro refinement team are really cool. I love Zach Cherry. I think he's such a fascinating presence, and this is a show that just exemplifies what he is good at, which is like the what the fuck energy. And his storyline's fantastic, like him falling in love with his wife, both as an innie and an outie, and the conflict that comes with that. And John Turturro, who is quietly giving the performance of his career in this, and that's so hard to say because he's so good at everything. But you just understand like the subtlety and the nuance that comes with a man who is in love and doesn't know how to express that. really good stuff. Like, he has some really good performances in a very specific episode where they are going on like a corporate retreat. He gets so much to do in that scenario. But some of the most impressive stuff we've seen from this season is from the actor playing Mr. Milchick, and that is Dramel Tillman, an actor I think just popped up here and said, yeah, I'll go crazy. I will be this specific type of crazy guy, and it works so well. It's unbelievable what he's doing. It's so impressive. Like, Adam Scott and Britt Lower, they are just phenomenal actors, and they can carry a show like this on their shoulders. When it comes to the Emmys, I think you should watch out for both of those two, because they are going to be getting some recognition for this. I think especially in critic circles now, this show's going to be on the radar, so watch out for that. But Dramel Tillman, like, you just don't expect it. Like, that performance to be one of the ones that stays with you. It could easily fall to the wayside, but it just captivates you at every single level. The fake sincerity, the over preachy stuff, and the genuine fear and terror. It's great. Maybe I'm underselling how good like Britt Lower and Adam Scott are in this thing. They're fantastic. Scott is in a very interesting era of his career where I think he's finally moved away from like the adorkable guy into I'm a pretty fucking intense guy, and I think that's great. He still does adorkable in here a little bit, but it just he's coming to his own both in terms of like the style of his hair and the way he is just intense on screen. It's kind of amazing. I think a lot of the camera work helps him get there too. And Britt Lower, just beautiful and so interesting and creative and given a lot to do. That works a lot for that character. But the Shen Lockman, who gets a whole episode dedicated to her character, may be the most interesting performance we saw this season. That is hard to do. Hard to do effectively, and she nails it. It is truly scary and intense and kind of what the whole show is about, like this control that comes from the people above you in the workplace. Do you exist as a being outside of work, or are you just something that a corporation can use to do whatever they want? What are they really aiming for? We don't really know, but we have seen what some of this stuff means in terms of like control and power. It's kind of terrifying. It is a quietly terrifying thing about people who can control other people and take away their free will and their right to exist. But then when a being exists, you know, what's the course there? It's the Mickey 17 thing we just talked about. When there's another version of you, does one of you deserve to die more than the other one or live more than the other one? It's very confusing, but very well handled. I think this show is great, and I think it just upped its ante in a really powerful way. Just better cinematography, better editing choices. The guest cameos all worked surprisingly well. We learned more about the world, and it all felt realized in like a whole thing that we're still getting snippets of. And it could go into a number of different ways, but there's clearly a path set out. And that finale, that final episode, it is the ultimate crescendo to everything we've been seeing this season. It all comes together beautifully in a very impacting and scary way. And it just leaves you going like, there's no right way out for this. We are trapped in hell. How do we escape? Can we get out? Or is this all we have? Kind of amazing. It's kind of amazing. Great television. So glad it is weekly. That really benefited to this show, because if it was dumped all at once, I feel like we'd get lost. Can't wait to see what comes next for the show. Season 3 is confirmed, and it's probably going to be less than a 3-year wait. So hopefully we get that by 2027. If not, I can wait till 2028. But you have the hype now. If you can shoot for a 2026 release, that is going to do you wonders. Let's hope we get there. So, Severance, season number 2, I am going to give a 9 out of 10. Now, thank you all for watching this review. Be sure to like and subscribe to the channel. As always, you can check me out on Instagram, TikTok, and Twitter. And of course, I will catch you in the next one. Have fun. Stay safe. Good luck.